On this edition for Saturday, December 5th, COVID cases continue to surge as cities weigh new stay-at-home orders. Campaigns raise millions ahead of the Georgia Senate runoff. And a look at the conflict in Ethiopia and the threat of instability in the region. Next on PBS NewsHour Weekend.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Sue and Edgar Wachenheim III, the Anderson Family Fund, Bernard and Denise Schwartz, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg, the Leonard and Norma Chlorfine Foundation, Charles Rosenblum. We try to live in the moment to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments.
For 25 years, Consumer Cellular's goal has been to provide wireless service that helps people communicate and connect. We offer a variety of no-contract plans, and our U.S.-based customer service team can help find one that fits you. To learn more, visit consumercellular.tv.
Additional support has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. The surge in coronavirus infections predicted to follow the Thanksgiving holiday is happening in many states this weekend. Yesterday, there were more than 228,000 new confirmed cases, a daily record, and 2,637 deaths across the country, according to the New York Times. There are more than 101,000 people hospitalized with the disease, a 28% increase from 2 weeks ago. In California, hospitalizations reached nearly 10,000 people yesterday, an increase of 84% over the average number 2 weeks ago. Governor Gavin Newsom announced Thursday that a new stay-at-home order would take effect if any of the 5 designated regions had fewer than 15% of their intensive care unit beds available. Yesterday, 2 regions, the San Joaquin Valley and Southern California, reached that 15% threshold. Fearing hospitals will soon be overwhelmed, 6 counties in the San Francisco Bay Area are not waiting for the threshold number. Health officials there announced a month-long shutdown will begin tomorrow. The order shuts down certain non-essential businesses, from hair and nail salons to museums and zoos. Restaurants can only offer takeout or delivery.
We know that if we wait, we are just delaying the inevitable. If we wait 1 or 2 more weeks to have these restrictions placed on us, it will just mean our numbers will be higher and harder to bring down.
Globally, there are now more than 66 million confirmed cases, and the race for a vaccine is underway. In Moscow, thousands of essential workers and people in high-risk groups began receiving COVID-19 vaccinations at 70 clinics across the city. President Vladimir Putin announced that the immunization campaign will make 2 million doses of the Sputnik V vaccine available within its first week. Clinical trials last month showed the vaccine was 91.4% effective in protecting people from COVID-19. For more on the coronavirus outbreak and the response, I spoke with Caitlin Rivers, senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security and an assistant professor in the Department of Environmental Health and Engineering at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
I am concerned that the winter holidays will intensify transmission. We saw after both Labor Day and Memorial Day that there were big surges about a month after those holidays, which is about what we would expect in terms of the epidemiology of the virus. Unfortunately, we are also already at a very high level of transmission, and so any acceleration of the outbreak would be a really grave situation to be in. And so that's why we're encouraging people to stay home for the holidays, celebrate on Zoom, find other ways to get together, just because we want to keep each other and our families safe.
Especially considering the loads and strains that so many of our hospitals around the country are under right now.
That's right. We now have over 100,000 people hospitalized with COVID-19 around the country. Previous highs, even in the spring when things were quite bad, were 60,000. And so we're well over that high water mark. And it's putting a lot of hospital systems under strain. They're having to really stretch to meet the demand. And so we really don't want to make that any worse.
Is there a false sense of confidence that might be inspired by the news, the positive news that we're hearing about vaccines? Because they're not here right now for anybody to take. I mean, it's still going to be possibly in the summer by the time most of us have access to them.
I think it is important to recognize that although a vaccine does seem to be on the horizon, and that's very exciting, we still do have a ways ahead of us. And right now we are in a particularly dangerous moment. And so although I encourage people to look ahead to that vaccine, maybe as motivation to stay committed to the mitigation measures that we're all observing to slow the virus, it's not here yet. And so we do need to continue to be cautious.
The CDC revised some of their guidelines last week, and that left some people concerned, well, should I be quarantining for 7 or 10 days? Or how should people be thinking about things now? Should we just kind of assume that we or other people might have it versus trying to play this odds game?
I think that it's a good development that CDC offered different options for shortening quarantine. It will make it easier for people to observe, and they offered supporting data that suggests that the alternate approaches are really quite safe. If you do need to quarantine, I recommend following the instructions of your local health department, but in general, I think it's a good development that we now have more flexibility for how to implement quarantine.
Are there any tests on the horizon that could make this problem a little easier to solve, meaning any at-home tests or I've heard of tests that might be similar to a pregnancy test that we could be taking at home and have results within 15 minutes, because testing seems to still be one of the bottlenecks here. Even though we're doing a lot more testing, we don't have it as widespread where people can make informed choices on how to travel or how to go to the office or how to interact with others.
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the more recent developments that started this fall is that there are tests that are they're cheaper, they're easier to use, they don't require a central laboratory, and they return results quite quickly. They're not yet widely available. They're primarily in the hands of the state governments, but I think that will change in the coming months. And I do hope that will give people more flexibility to use testing to determine whether or not they're infected before making choices about what activities to undertake. Whether or not that will be available like a pregnancy test where you can buy it at the grocery store, buy it at the pharmacy, and keep it at home is not clear. That's actually more of a regulatory issue than a technology issue. But if the FDA were to go that direction, I think it would be a good development.
Right now, there's also a gap in urgency. I mean, in the spring, when New York was the epicenter of all of this, the nation seemed to be paying attention because it was new. And here we are now. We've got more people in the hospital, more people dying per day. And somehow, I don't know if it's fatigue, I don't know what it is, but we don't seem to care as much.
This has been a challenge. It has been such a persistent crisis that I think people have become really worn down, and it's just difficult to live in that heightened state for so long. But we have now had over 275,000 deaths, which is a really shocking number. If we had looked back in 2019 and learned that the year ahead held that kind of mass casualty, it would be absolutely stunning. And so I think it's important that we take a moment regularly to reflect on what a tragedy this has been and to redouble our efforts to slow transmission and prevent those future deaths.
Dr. Caitlin Rivers, epidemiologist at Johns Hopkins, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
President-elect Joe Biden officially has the majority of Electoral College votes needed to win the White House after California certified its vote yesterday. The state's formal approval of Biden's win gave him 55 more electors, bringing his total to 279, just over the 270 threshold for victory. 3 more states Biden won, Colorado, Hawaii, and New Jersey, have not yet certified their results. When they do, Biden will have 306 Electoral College votes to President Trump's 232. Normally, the certifications are often overlooked as formalities, but this year they are getting more attention as Mr. Trump continues to make unproven claims of fraud and has not conceded. The Electoral College meets December 14th to formally elect the next president, and Congress votes on that decision on January 6th. President Trump is set to hold a rally in Georgia tonight as both Democrats and Republicans battle for votes in the upcoming Senate runoff election next month that will determine which party controls the U.S. Senate. President-elect Biden has said he also plans to visit Georgia soon. Both parties are pouring millions of dollars into Georgia's dueling Senate runoff races set for January 5th. In Savannah yesterday, Vice President Pence appeared at a rally for Republican Senators Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. The two incumbents face Democratic challengers Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock in the January vote. Ricky Bevington, senior correspondent for Georgia Public Broadcasting, has been reporting on the Georgia Senate runoff race and more. She joined me from Atlanta, Georgia.
Ari, when I last spoke to you, I warned you that Georgia was going to become the center of the political universe. It has come true. I have a crystal ball. Today alone, Donald Trump will be here with his wife, Melania Trump, in South Georgia, not Metro Atlanta, South Georgia, which is deep red Georgia. Yesterday, Vice President Mike Pence was here. If just one of these seats goes to one of the Republican incumbents, the GOP maintains control of the U.S. Senate. Needless to say, we anticipate about $500 million in ad spending just for this election. It's a big deal for Republicans.
And what about the Democrats? What are they doing to try to counter this?
We have seen a lot of celebrity endorsements, shall we say, everybody from Justin Timberlake to Pearl Jam to Kerry Washington having online fundraisers. And of course, we already have the homegrown Georgia star power of Stacey Abrams, a former gubernatorial candidate who came very close to winning as a Democrat for governor 2 years ago. And I've even seen, Hari, a celebrity poker tournament to raise money on the Democratic side. So both sides are raising huge amounts of money.
This also comes at a time when the president is still railing against the results in Georgia, talking about fraud that has not been substantiated. The Secretary of State in Georgia and others that are responsible for the election have been very vocal this past week, saying there's nothing wrong with our numbers.
And there is no evidence that there's anything wrong with Georgia's numbers. After 3 counts of 5 million presidential ballots, Joe Biden maintains his lead and his victory over Donald Trump by about 12,000 votes. And so far, not a single lawsuit has held up in court. Rudy Giuliani, the president's attorney, was here on Thursday having a 7-hour-long hearing with Republican state lawmakers trying to prove his case. The fact of the matter is, Hari, there's no evidence.
And this is the same system that Republicans who have held power in Georgia for quite some time have been using.
We have an entirely Republican slate of constitutional office holders, from the governor to the insurance commissioner, and of course, Republican majorities in both the state house and state senate. And these are the lawmakers who have spent the last 2 years looking into new elections technology. They selected the elections technology, had hearings, and spent $110 million of Georgia taxpayer money on a brand new election system. And to this day, they remain extremely confident in their decision on how they decided to run Georgia's elections this year.
What are you expecting from these campaigns? I mean, you're likely already inundated with advertisements on television. How much worse or better can it get?
Yesterday, I got a postcard in the mail from some voter in California encouraging me to vote. Georgians are going to be encouraged to vote in all the ways that we know that people are encouraged to vote, including you cannot turn on the television without every ad being a political ad. There's even discussion of local TV stations creating entirely new shows simply so they can sell airtime for political ads, right? So we may be seeing new newscasts pop up. I don't know, the 2:30 p.m. local newscast simply to sell airtime. Of course, I'm being silly, Hari, but it does give you a sense. They've got to spend that $500 million somewhere.
In this next month, are we expected to see candidates debate each other, for example?
Hari, the Atlanta Press Club and Georgia Public Broadcasting are hosting all 4 senatorial candidates on Sunday at 5 p.m. This will be nationally broadcast. This will be Reverend Warnock and Kelly Loeffler debating on stage, of course, all socially distanced. And we'll have Democrat Jon Ossoff debating an empty podium. Republican Senator David Perdue has declined to appear, so the panel will spend 30 minutes asking Ossoff questions. And again, that is 5 p.m. Eastern on Sunday on Georgia Public Broadcasting, also hosted by the Atlanta Press Club.
Ricky Bevington, Georgia Public Broadcasting. Thanks so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Hari. Thank you.
For more on the Georgia Senate runoff and the latest national and international news, visit pbs.org/newshour. The Pentagon announced late yesterday that U.S. troops will leave Somalia on orders of President Trump. The drawdown will begin early next year. The approximately 700 service members there are currently involved in counterterrorism operations against the al-Qaeda-affiliated group al-Shabaab. In the announcement, the Department of Defense said some of the U.S. troops will remain in neighboring countries, quote, to maintain pressure against violent extremist organizations operating in Somalia. A large multinational military force remains in Somalia, and thousands of its troops come from Ethiopia, which is now in the midst of a military conflict in its northern Tigray region. For more on the continuing conflict in Ethiopia and the impact it's having on the region, I spoke with Cameron Hudson, a senior fellow with the Atlantic Council's Africa Center and former director for African Affairs at the National Security Council during the George W. Bush administration. Cameron, we've been reporting on the momentary kind of strife that's been happening on a weekend by weekend basis. But if you could explain for us, put this in perspective, what is the conflict about?
Well, the conflict is really about kind of ethnic federalism. Ethiopia is made up of 10 different ethnic regions, and a lot of autonomy has been devolved down to that regional level. And as part of Prime Minister Abiy's kind of overall democratic reform process, he really sought to erase a lot of those ethnic differences in the country and promote a kind of pan-Ethiopian nationalism almost. And I think what you're seeing here, certainly in the Tigray region, which is traditionally where the power center has been in the country, is a feeling that they have been sort of cast aside in the political process in the country. And you're seeing now a kind of more formalized agitation for a return to kind of ethnic federalism and the promotion of ethnic rights. And so it is really part of a democratic reform process that Abiy has been undertaking, but which probably hasn't had enough buy-in from all of these ethnic minorities across the country.
I mean, this is a person who won a Nobel Peace Prize, yet here he is part of a conflict that has displaced hundreds of thousands of people.
The Nobel Prize was obviously for an international effort to heal wounds of the war with Eritrea, which took place in the late 1990s. What we're seeing now, though, is Eritrea, as the partner in peace, may have now become the partner in war. We have seen cooperation between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and even the active involvement of Eritrean forces in this conflict in Tigray. And so I think that with respect to the Nobel, people are asking whether it was premature. I think it was a kind of a hoped for movement in a direction of peace. But what we're seeing is his effort to make peace with Eritrea is not a reflection on his tactics domestically.
What are the consequences for the countries surrounding this region as displaced people start to head for those borders?
Well, it's huge. I mean, you cannot underestimate frankly, the beneficial role that Ethiopia has played in the region. It is the largest provider of peacekeeping forces on the continent of Africa, and it has played an essential role in conflicts in Somalia and Sudan in recent years. It is the largest provider of peacekeepers in the Somali conflict, which we as a U.S. government have spent billions being a part of and trying to stabilize that country. We're on the precipice of seeing Ethiopian troops completely withdrawn from that theater in advance of elections there. Obviously, they've also been a major peacemaker and mediator in conflicts in both Sudan, the democratic revolution that's been going on there, and in the civil conflict that took place in South Sudan just a few years ago. So if we see Ethiopia move from the traditional role of peacemaker and mediator to a net exporter of instability, then you could see an entire region really, really destabilized going forward.
Tell me a little bit about the humanitarian crisis that happens when all these people leave their homes.
Well, right now it's really hard to assess the degree of the humanitarian crisis because the region has been so cut off to outside humanitarian assistance and even communications. So even though this week the UN reached an agreement with the Abiy government to allow humanitarian access into the region, we've seen that fighting up till today, up and through today, has really prevented those assessment missions from even getting eyes on the situation. But we do know that even before this conflict started, this was an incredibly insecure region. As much as 20% of the population was food insecure. There were over 100,000 internally displaced. There are estimates now that there are 1 million internally displaced people. We really only have access to about the 50,000 or so that have crossed the border in the last few weeks into Sudan. But we know that there are pockets of internally displaced that we are not able to access. And the fears are growing that those are populations that were surviving on international assistance. That international assistance has been cut off for the last month of fighting. And so we really don't know what we're going to find when we're finally able to access those areas.
If the fighting officially comes to an end, does that mean that the forces that are in opposition just literally head for the hills and fight from there?
Well, that seems to be what's happening right now. I mean, last weekend, there was this very tense standoff around the regional Tigrayan capital of Mekelle, which was encircled essentially by federal government troops. The siege of Mekelle never happened because the Tigrayan leaders kind of fled into the mountains surrounding the region. I think we have to recall Ethiopia's recent history. It fought a very long war against a communist Derg, where the TPLF, the Tigrayan party, essentially led a counterinsurgency campaign from the hills to overthrow this communist regime. And so I think there's a great fear that they're going to kind of return to their roots and not fight a conventional fight against federal government forces, but instead go to the mountains and try for sort of asymmetrical warfare. And in that case, it might not be limited to the Tigray region. You could see conflict spilling over into other parts of the country, trying to draw in these other ethnic groups into the fight that they have started.
Cameron Hudson, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
President Trump is scheduled to have his first post-election rally this evening at a Georgia airport. We will have more on the presidential transition and the Georgia Senate races tomorrow. That's all for this edition of PBS NewsHour Weekend. For the latest news updates, visit pbs.org/newshour. I'm Hari Srinivasan. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and have a good night.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Sue and Edgar Wachenheim III, the Anderson Family Fund, Bernard and Denise Schwartz, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg, the Leonard and Norma Clorfine Foundation, Charles Rosenblum. We try to live in the moment to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments. Additional support has been provided by Consumer Cellular and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people. And by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.